There are some things that simply cannot be explained away. Some things that defy logic, science, and reason. From sinister neighbors to ghostly phone calls, here are 3 disturbing true stories where the police couldn't help. Story 1: The Man in the Hoodie. Fall 2021. I had just moved into a quiet townhouse in a nice neighborhood in Illinois. It was a great deal. 2 bedrooms, 2 and a 2 baths, big backyard, newly remodeled kitchen, in-unit laundry and parking spot. Plus, it was close to everything. So I jumped on it. I'd finally get to live alone for the first time. I could decorate how I wanted. I could cook whatever I wanted without somebody complaining. It would be just me and my cat. We were excited to move in. Everything seemed normal. The walls were thick. The neighbors kept to themselves. My cat adjusted well, and we quickly settled in. It was good. I loved it. Until I noticed my neighbor. It was about 8 p.m., and I was washing dishes when I saw him for the first time. He was standing outside his sliding glass door looking at me. I waved, and he froze. Then he turned away and went inside. Strange, but not a big deal. I chalked it up to a neighbor being nosy. People are weird. I shrugged it off and went back to my dinner. But every night after that, he was there. He stood outside every night around 8 p.m., stood in silence and just stared. Sometimes he took notes on a notepad. Other times he held a pair of binoculars. Once he used a telescope. He never spoke, never smiled, just stared. At first, I wondered if he was watching me, but we were on opposite sides of the building, 3rd-story windows far apart. Plus, the whole building is facing east. He wasn't even looking towards the sun. And then one night, I noticed he wasn't holding binoculars or a notebook or anything. So maybe he just liked standing outside. But the next night, the man was back. But this time he was holding his phone up like he was recording something. He was recording me. I felt violated. When I saw him the next night, I called the police. They came, they found nothing, and told me it was probably just a raccoon. Raccoons often stare at people, and raccoons will sometimes record you. Okay. The next night, I heard footsteps outside my sliding glass door. I called the police again. They came, found nothing, told me it was probably a raccoon. I was convinced it was the man. But how could I prove it? The police said if it happens again, call them. So I did. One night at 2:37 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my sliding glass door. I called the police. They came, found nothing, and told me it was probably a raccoon. But I knew it wasn't. I had heard enough. I needed proof. So the next night, I set up cameras. 2:23 a.m., the video shows a man in a black hoodie walk into frame. He looks straight at the camera and smiles. The same man from outside. The police admitted it was creepy, but still not enough to act. What could I do? The next night, I left town. The next morning, I came back and checked the footage. The man was back. I also found muddy handprints on my glass door. I asked the police to check his cameras, but they said they couldn't. It wasn't a crime. A week later, I moved out. But just before leaving, I found a note in my mailbox that read, "The cops leave, but I don't." A month later, a Facebook message came from the new tenant. She wrote, "Did you ever see a guy in a black hoodie in the backyard? He knocked on my glass door last night and just stood there." I didn't reply. I didn't want to know what happened next. Story 2, the rotating call. 2020. I worked in property preservation. My company cleaned out foreclosed homes before they were put up for auction. This one house in upstate New York was massive, isolated and dusty. Windows covered in grime, cobwebs everywhere, trash piled up inside. It looked like a hoarder's dream. As I began work, my phone rang. I pulled it out of my pocket and stared at it. The screen was cracked. There was no number showing. All I could hear was static. It was completely dead. Then it rang again, so I brought it to my ear. It was faint, barely audible, but it was a whisper. And all I heard was, "Don't answer the phone in the bedroom." Then it hung up. It was odd, sure, but not a huge deal. I texted my boss and continued working. I finished clearing out the downstairs, took the trash out, removed the furniture, vacuumed up the dust. I was heading upstairs when my phone rang again. I told my coworker to stay downstairs and listen to the phone. It made no sense. There was no signal. I figured it was time to explore. I went inside, walked through the halls, past rooms filled with junk, to the source of the sound, the bedroom. And there it was, the rotary phone from hell. The phone had been disconnected for over a year. How was it ringing now? It rang again, so I picked it up. I wanted to hear it for myself. The line was dead. I waited, listening for any sound, but there was nothing. In the basement, I found a stack of notebooks filled with names and numbers, a list of some sort. Then there was another room with piles of wires and routers and phones. And then I found a cordless phone, still plugged in. I brought it to my ear and it dialed the last number automatically. The receiver was dead. I searched the rest of the house, but there was nothing else. I ran back to the basement to check the phone again. But this time I found more notebooks. And as I flipped through one of them, I realized what I was dealing with. Names, dates, and messages. Warned him. He didn't answer. Called back. Told him to run. He hung up. Someone had been trying to contact these people for years, desperately reaching out. I bolted. I ran out of that house and called my boss. I told him the place was unsafe. He sent my coworker Mark to finish the job. He cleared out the rest of the house. But the next day he texted me. That old phone rang when I was there. I quit the next day. Whatever was in that house, it didn't want to be ignored. Story 3. The basement breathing. 2019. I lived in a small rental home with an old basement. For months, nothing happened. Then I started hearing knocking, always at night, always from the basement. I talked to my landlord. He checked the pipes and found nothing. I thought it was mice, but the knocking got louder, more frequent, and more regular. It was coming from behind the basement door. One night, I was watching TV when the basement door slowly creaked open. I hadn't touched it. I was staring at the television, and suddenly the door started opening. I looked down and watched it inch by inch. I pressed pause on the TV, shone my flashlight down the stairs, and the light switch didn't work. Then I heard footsteps. They were coming up the stairs. I slammed the basement door shut and called the police. They searched and found nothing. The next week, I came home to find the padlock I installed broken. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside, but there was nothing. No sign of forced entry, no damage, and the basement was empty. A few days later, while lying in bed, I heard something beneath the floorboards. It was a voice, not words, just vocal cords rumbling. Like something was breathing right under my bed. I packed up my stuff and left that night. I still wonder what would have come up those steps. Outro 9:46 to 10 o'clock. Sometimes, the scariest part isn't what happens. It's that no one believes you. When the police can't help, what then? Thanks for watching.